Hi, my name is Emily Davis, and this is Two Extremes, stories about my life with bipolar disorder and how I try my best to kick it in the ass. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to briefly make you aware of a couple of things. The first is that my band Emily Davis and the Murder Police have a couple new singles that you can stream wherever your preference is, and you could also download them at emilydavis.bandcamp.com, so give them a listen, yeah? And then I also have a link in the description to my Patreon, so if you want to check that out and see how you can be a monthly supportive member, feel free to do that. It's greatly appreciated. So today's video, I'm talking about an experience I had with being hospitalized. The third and most recent time I was hospitalized was in 2017, and it was at a mental health hospital. The explicit purpose was to treat what I think was probably best described as a mixed episode at the time. And this is actually when I was formally and first diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So for people who have been hospitalized and want to hear someone else commiserate, or for people out there who have considered hospitalization and want to hear about my experience with it, or for people who maybe know someone that needs to be hospitalized or has been hospitalized, this might be relevant information, which is why I think it's worth talking about. So let's do it. So like I mentioned, back in 2017, I had been going to a local outpatient clinic. It's just really community-based, main epicenter really in El Paso for mental health care. I had been being treated at this facility for about a year for depression. And for the better part of a year, I was taking Zoloft to treat this depression. And clearly it wasn't working because I had gotten to a place that was pretty serious and I would argue definitely necessitated hospitalization. Although that's probably something at the time I wouldn't have admitted. Moreover, and I might have mentioned this before, but I was on a medication that should not be prescribed to someone who has bipolar disorder. But at the time, I didn't know that I had it, and the people at this outpatient facility who didn't have a whole lot of accessibility with me, given the amount of patients they have to care for, which is in the thousands, we really hadn't fleshed that out. And so they were putting a medication in my system that I had been familiarized before with in high school. And so because it at one point had seemed effective for me, I guess that's why they chose to put me back on it. I didn't go in on the particular day that I got hospitalized intending to be hospitalized. I was seeing a new counselor. I had never met her. She had no context from my backstory. And I went in not feeling horrible, but for whatever reason, the questions she asked were incisive enough that they elicited out of me a very significant emotional response. I began crying and expressing how I felt emotionally out of control. And that was one of the biggest problems that I had been challenged by. And I had tried for many years to understand it, to curb it, to control it in some fashion. And what I failed to realize at the time is that this is a very clear signal of hypomania, which is something that as a person with bipolar 2, I have experienced. Emotional regulation is something that is very difficult to do when you have a broad range of emotions and they vacillate the way that they can with bipolar disorder. And so I was explaining this struggle to her, and I became very emotional about it because it's something that I'm embarrassed about then and now, and I was frustrated because it was something that I was so tired of battling. At the time when she suggested to me that I should be hospitalized, I balked at the suggestion because I wasn't self-harming. I didn't have a plan. I was just in a really, really low place and couldn't emotionally regulate. And so she suggested it, and initially I had no desire to do that. I was in the middle of my last semester of college. I was looking to graduate. I was in a band. We were actively writing songs and trying to promote our music. It just seemed like the worst time ever. I think the thing that really kind of finally made me agree to hospitalization was the fact that I just didn't know what the answer was. I have suspected throughout my adolescence and into my adulthood that there was an explanation or a culprit for why my brain works the way it does. And it seemed like just having depression or just having anxiety. Not that those, I'm not trying to minimize the reality and the difficulties of those. It just felt like it was something else, something beyond that. And at first, I felt that being diagnosed with ADHD when I was 24 solved the riddle, but it very clearly did not because it felt like I was still struggling with some kind of unseen force. I never even remotely thought about it being bipolar, but I figured, you know what, if I'm having such a hard time emotionally regulating, maybe there needs to be a change in medications. I recognize that that can be a dangerous pursuit, so maybe this is the way to do it. Fuck it, it's an experience, you know? I've never been to a mental health hospital. I've never lived my girl interrupted fantasy. Why not? Fuck it. And so Even though I was very resistant at first, I think I came to understand that I had to be proactive. My whole mental health journey started with the loss of my cousin, who was killed by police in Arizona back 4 years ago. And my cousin dealt with a gamut of mental health issues. And it was a wake-up call. I knew where I was at the time, but I didn't know where my future path was, if left unchecked. Having that knowledge and knowing that I needed to be proactive and knowing that I had no other solution at the time, I agreed to it. And I said, okay, let's go. Looking back, I think she probably saw something there that I just wasn't capable of seeing at the time. And so I'm very grateful to her for her insistence, because it ended up being a completely life-changing experience for me. I was sent to a local mental health hospital called UBH in El Paso with the idea that I would be there for at least a week receiving treatment. I would be assessed by a psychiatrist. They would try to find a correction in my medications and go from there and observe me and make sure that the process worked out. And if I ended up stabilizing at some point or feeling more adjusted on the medications, then I'd be released. It was a pretty simple, straightforward case. I didn't really know what to expect when I got to UBH. I was surprised to find that everyone's just kind of lumped in together, irrespective of what your diagnosis might be. I had never had any kind of close contact with somebody who had schizophrenia, and it was very heartbreaking and illuminating to see the kind of struggles that these people go through. I can't imagine how difficult it is being somebody who works in the mental health industry. I have met some amazing people who have such a big heart and genuinely want to help because it's a passion of theirs. And I've met other people who just seem completely burnt out and are callous as a result. And it's hard. You know, there were some people, especially in the night crew, that were very kind. I felt very well received and cared for by certain individuals. I felt like some people were really open and listening and genuinely trying to see my issue and commiserate with me and help me. And then there were some MHTs that were just horrible. They were rude. They herded us like cattle. I remember one morning, I was just in shock. These two MHTs, who had been total bitches to me the whole time I was there, were rude, herded me like cattle, yelled at us, never showed any kind of, it was almost as if they thought they were better than us, and I really didn't appreciate it. But I remember one morning I wake up, and they're in front of the mirror in my room taking selfies, like not 5-10 feet from my bed. And I just couldn't believe how much disregard they had for me and my existence in that moment. As if not being hospitalized is enough. It's like I was a painting on the wall. There wasn't an actual human being struggling and trying to figure out their life in that room. I was just not noticeable to them. I don't say any of that to dissuade anybody from being hospitalized, because there are going to be nurse ratchets probably. You're going to encounter them. But I mean, that's part of the process, and it's still, you're going to find other people who can really positively change your life. And so I say that because I want the expectations to be grounded in reality. There are going to be people that are crappy, no matter where you go or what you do. These were two fine, shining examples of just that. So I wasn't seen or evaluated until the second day. I had a 5-minute conversation with a nurse practitioner. And at the end, he basically wrote down a prescription, and it was for lithium and it was for Seroquel. And I remember looking at the Seroquel and being like, yo, wait, what is this? And it was listed as an antipsychotic. That in and of itself has a really negative connotation. Antipsychotic doesn't sound very complimentary. You know, you hear antipsychotic and you suddenly jump to all kinds of stupid conclusions. And so I did that. I saw being prescribed these medications that in my naivety I associated with a mental state that was not remotely what I was experiencing. And I remember asking him very pointedly, I was like, why are you putting me on these medications? He's like, well, we're diagnosing you with bipolar. And I'm like, there is no way I have bipolar disorder. And of course, that's because my conception of bipolar disorder at the time was so flawed and based on so many assumptions and negative connotations that exist in society. And I asked him, what makes you think I'm bipolar? And his example was that I talk fast. And I remember just being like, this was a mistake. Coming here was a mistake. I want to leave. He's diagnosing me based on how rapid my speech is. And I find that to be ridiculous. And so again, I left the room, and very much in the same manner that I departed with the lady who referred me into the hospitalization in the first place with, that doesn't seem right. That seems out of reality or reasonability, but I'm here to try and fix things or address them. And I'm not going to know unless I try it. And life is boring, and I'm not at any other place that I want to be. So I might as well just buckle up for the ride and see what happens. And I remember, at the end of the evening, about an hour before I went to bed, I took the Seroquel. And I'm sitting with another lady there who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And we were talking about all kinds of things, our mental health history. And I remember looking out the window into the city. It was a really nice view. And for the first time in like a very, very, very long time, I just felt still. And even now, it's a very rare feeling. My brain was always active, and I was always stressed or worried or worked up over something. But I was, for the first time in a very long time, able to just sit there and look at the city and listen to somebody else and feel incredibly in the moment. Now, I don't know how Seroquel works. I don't imagine it works within an hour. Like, I know that's likely what that was a placebo, but it was still a very powerful moment for me. And I can't explain it other than it happened. And I needed it. And I appreciated it. And the next day, I started reading this literature that this doctor had given me, and I started choosing to educate myself about bipolar disorder. Once you educate and you're able to reflect, I was able to assess myself and look at my history and see very clear patterns of hypomania or mixed episodes, in addition to my depression. And it was like somebody took the scales off my eyes. It was very mind-blowing to me how wrong I was about this disorder and how wrong I was in assuming that I didn't have it. So I spent the rest of the week adjusting to the medication, researching further about bipolar disorder, and complying to the best of my ability. We didn't get the medications right overnight. It took a few different alterations, but I can't stress enough how much hospitalization changed my life. I would be in a very different place if I had not pursued it. To some extent, I think it definitely may have saved my life. I wanted for so long to understand what is wrong with me. And I mean, you're not ever going to have a perfect picture, but I knew there was a culprit. I knew there was an explanation, and I knew it was out there. And there was just something that wasn't connecting. And to finally have that understanding changed my life. And so what I want people to take away from this is hospitalization is so scary. And you feel like a loss of power in choosing to go down that route. This isn't ubiquitous with everybody, but for me, I certainly felt a sense of humiliation having to tell my family that I was going into a hospital, having to tell my bandmates, my boyfriend, that I was going into a hospital, that I was going to be receiving care, having to have them worry about it or wonder if I was doing it out of necessity or if I was doing it for attention seeking or something. These are things that people with these disorders struggle with, these certain paranoias, because of, social mores and the taboo nature surrounding hospitalization and mental health. And there's people I know in my life who've expressed a desire to get treated, but they're scared to be hospitalized because the optics of it, certainly, the loss of control, the individuals they might encounter, the things they might see. I saw some emotional stuff in there, some outbursts and people really struggling. There were nights I couldn't sleep because I would hear people screaming in rooms next to me. And that's not an enjoyable experience. No one wants to experience that. But I left being diagnosed. And I left finally on the right path to getting treated. And I would not trade that for anything, ever. Maybe hospitalization isn't for everybody, but if it's something you're considering, I wouldn't rule it out. I would talk to someone who's dealt with it. I would consider it. Consider your options. What else can you do? It's that or struggle and never have the answer. So yeah, I hope this was a valuable video to someone out there, and I really appreciate you watching it. I'll do this again soon, so keep viewing, subscribe, do all that jazz. I would also really appreciate you guys leaving a comment and telling me what you want to see in future videos. I have some ideas, but I think a lot of people out there probably have far better ideas, and I'm excited to hear them and apply them. So feel free to do that for me, and check out the links in the description. Thank you very much, and we'll talk soon. Take care.